One Heroes Fund to help protect those who protect us. So come into a Napa Auto Parts store today at participating Napa Auto Parts stores while supplies last. See store for details. Offer expires 11/17/13.
Do you owe the IRS over $20,000 in back taxes, have unfiled returns, or are under audit? Are your receivables being levied? If you're an independent contractor or business owner, you must know your rights and options. The IRS has the power to take your receivables and shut you down. Tax Resolution Services can help. Tax Resolution Services will completely handle your case for you and deal with the IRS on your behalf and can negotiate a settlement of up to 85% off the original amount owed, including penalties and interest if you qualify. Call Tax Resolution Services now at 866-IRS-PROBLEMS or log on to taxresolution.com.
Here is the official News Talk 1090 WKBZ forecast for today. Plenty of sunshine with a high of 62, northwest winds 10 to 20. Tonight, generally clear skies at a low of 41 with northeast winds 5 to 10. Back to mostly sunny skies tomorrow with a high close to 65, northeast winds 5 to 10, and a chance of showers for Tuesday, otherwise mostly cloudy with a high of 67. Cooler on Wednesday, still a chance of rain at a high of 56. Keeping you informed, News Talk 1090 WKBZ, the talk of Muskegon.
Be a survivor, not a statistic. Renegade River in Spring Lake has new and used handguns, hunting guns, sporting goods, and survival gear. Protect your rights and your freedom. Ask about their CPL classes. Renegade River, next to the police station in downtown Spring Lake. Renegade River in Spring Lake wants to buy your used handguns and hunting guns. Renegade River, your hunting, camping, and survival store. Stop in and check out their new and used firearms, sporting goods, Army and Navy supplies, and survival gear. Downtown Spring Lake, next to the police station.
News Talk 1090 is the talk of Muskegon.
Welcome, you're listening to the Renegade River Show. I'm Mike Hewitt, and we're in today with Jim Riley again. Welcome back, Jim.
Hey, great to be here. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Listen, Jim, when we left off last week, right at the very end of the show, we went off into some territory where we were not exactly in alignment. So I thought I'd pick up right where we left off with her. You were wrong on a few issues.
That clearly is an error in your memory.
That's exactly how I've got it remembered.
Well, I'll let you take it a few steps here so that I can jump in. I'm not exactly sure where you might have confused fact with fiction.
Here's the question. If you have a district with, well, let's pick a district. Let's take Jeff Hansen's district.
Okay, you mean Senator Jeff Hansen, his
Hansen.
senatorial district, the election district.
Yeah, in fact, let's do two. We can compare two just for funsies, because on one side I'll probably agree with you, on the other side I won't. We'll start with Jeff Hansen's. That district tends to be a moderate district. Jeff Hansen's voting record is moderate at best.
Okay, fair enough.
So is it good for a legislator to go and vote their conscience, or is it good for them to go and vote how they believe that their constituency in total would want them to vote?
Well, you're asking the question, is it good for whom? Are you saying is it good for the candidate or the politician, or is it good for the public?
Is it good for the public in total?
Oh, I think what we want, and I think this is what has disillusioned so many American voters, both left and right, is that they vote for someone who says, I stand for X, whatever X may be. And then that politician, once elected, does not do the things that they had promised. So I think that clearly for the American voters, politicians should stand tall, stay the course, and vote the way they promised that that they would vote once elected. George Herbert Walker Bush famously said, read my lips, no new taxes. Many people voted for him. He won overwhelmingly. And, of course, he broke that promise. He made a promise to the electorate. He got punished for it. So I do believe that they shouldn't vote for putting their finger in the wind, seeing which way the media will gush over them. Stand tall for what you believe in, run or lose based on principles that come from within. Because if you're not running on principles that come from within, if you are in fact looking at whichever the way the wind blows, you're surely going to be upsetting a lot of people and breaking promises that you had made. And let's just use Senator Jeff Hansen's his website as an example. He ran as a Republican, and he ran, I believe that website is still up, he ran promising smaller government, more efficient government, and government that would be responsive to the people in terms of spending. And, of course, then just within the last couple of months, he's voted to expand Medicaid within the state of Michigan to the tune of 400 to 600,000 people, to increase taxes on hunting and fishing fees, and he has made it clear that he will vote, if it does come up, to increase taxes on internet purchases. Those are things that are at odds with the promises that he had made in his website and verbally to other people who had previously supported him.
You and I actually agree on all that. Here's the difference. Take the Holly Hughes district we're sitting in right now. I can't think of what's the Democrat's name that now represents this district?
Colleen Lamonte.
If you look at Holly Hughes's...
And Holly is the Republican who had been there for...
She was the incumbent that got ousted.
Correct.
My point is if you look at that district, or if you look at Jeff Hansen's district, those districts both tend to be moderate. So it doesn't seem to matter whether you end up with a Republican or a Democrat. Regardless of how they campaigned, candidate after candidate that wins tends to have moderate politics. Now, and then of course, fellows like me come from the right saying, Jeff, that's not what you said. You said limited government. You're not voting that way, but yet that's how his district would have him vote if they could get together, and they do every time it's election time, and they elect another moderate just like him, regardless of what his website says.
Well, I think maybe to go back a little bit to what we were beginning to talk about last week, which was if you are a Republican or a Democrat, or maybe better, a conservative or a liberal, and if, in fact, you are voting, and I'll take my case because I am a conservative and I have generally voted Republican most of my life, if I vote for a candidate who promises me certain things, and these are not the social issues that you can be on either side, these are basic Republican issues which tend to be, at least as promised, smaller government, less spending, less government interference into business and into our personal lives. If, in fact, those candidates who we do support and ultimately win betray us, I don't think there's any other word for it. They've promised to do one thing, and they've done something else. That is, by every definition, a betrayal of the trust, and it's a betrayal of the promises that they had made. Then the question is, what do we do if we keep being Charlie Brown to Lucy up there? Lucy is holding the football, promising that she'll keep the football down for Charlie to kick a field goal, and she keeps pulling it apart. What do we do if those that we have elected on the Republican side continuously betray us? I think an option, certainly the best option, is to primary, in other words, support those conservatives who would run against elected Republicans in the primaries and support them. But what happens in the most likely event where the established Republican with a significant financial resources and connections, certainly within the media, where they beat the challenger from the right, the more conservative challenger in the primary? What do we then do? Because one of the things that I think so many of us Republicans and conservatives feel, certainly after 8 years of George W. Bush, is that, my gosh, our guys were in charge clearly and totally for 6 years, and we still had the President of the United States, George Bush, for 2 more years. And what happened to government? It got bigger. The debt got much greater. The intrusion of government into business and personal life got way more extensive. These were not the types of things that George Bush had promised. These were not the types of results that our elected representatives and our elected senators had promised, and yet it happened. So what do we do?
I'm going to, in the second segment, we'll talk about what we can do. But just for contrast to when we're looking at Holly Hughes or Lamont's district or Jeff Hansen's 34th district, because frankly, I really wrestle with the concept of whether that person should be. And I recently had a meeting with Amanda Price, by the way.
And Amanda Price is who?
She's the 89th district state representative, comes from the northern portion of Ottawa County.
And she'd be a Republican?
She is a Republican.
Okay.
And how all this dovetails for me is I look at Jeff Hansen's district, which is historically moderate. They can go back and forth between Democrat and Republican. Whoever they elect tends to have about the same voting trend or voting track record.
Yeah, they're
They
very
do.
similar votes
They-
that you would see.
they-
Jeff Hansen's voting record is identical to many Democrat state senators.
No question about it. And half of that district is very Democrat founded. So for me, when I look at his voting record and then I look at his constituency in total, I'm not racked with shock. One represents the other. And the same goes for the Lamont, the Holly Hughes district here where we're sitting. But then I look to a person like Amanda Price. And by her definition, the 89th district is she said it's the third most conservative House district of 110 House seats. I think she's right. It's certainly in the top 5, and we could that part we could at least document. But then when I look at her voting record, for me, it's the opposite question of who should serve a moderate district. It's one of the most conservative districts, and we've got somebody that voted for Common Core that is advancing and voting for the Main Street tax, and certainly voted for the Medicaid explosion that Governor O. Snyder put forward. So for me, when I stand back and look at it, I think you've got what I've said before. You got 110 House seats. Of them, depending on who's telling the story, there are 12-ish, plus or minus, that are swing districts. They can go either way. I think that we really should be shoring up those districts that are safe conservative districts with conservative representation. That should be, in my mind, our first line of defense. What say you?
Well, I say I look at the candidates individually as the candidates that I can vote for. I'm not part of the national structure. I am, sadly, a totally powerless part of the straight Republican Party apparatus. No, I don't think you look at the district. I think Ronald Reagan proved this. Ronald Reagan was fought like crazy. He lost to Jerry Ford in primary battles and prior to his getting nominated to be president of the United States.
76. Yep.
He was fought by certainly the news media. He was challenged by the Democrats. He was challenged by the established Republicans. He went and said things that everyone, all the experts said could never get him elected, and he proved them to be wrong. I believe that people should run on principles. Be you a liberal Democrat or you conservative Republican, I think the mushy middle, where it doesn't matter if it's let's just say a Jeff Hansen, where if it's a Republican or a Democrat in his case, that's exactly what we want to end. You do not see Colleen Lamonti, and you do not see any of the other Democrats within our state switching back and forth between parties. They vote straight Democrat party line. If you are a Democrat voter, at the very least, you can say, my golly, they promised me they were going to vote this way, and they did it. If you are a Republican voter, I'm not talking about somebody who cares about R's behind people's names. I'm talking about a Republican voter who believes in issues, believes that there are certain things that government can do and certain things that government doesn't do very well and should not do. And you are told one thing by your candidate and they do otherwise, I think we have a reason to feel, betrayed.
So if you have a district that by far and large is moderate in political nature, forget our Republican and Democrat, but if they're by far and large very moderate or centrist is probably even a more appropriate word. The district is centrist, and you get somebody like me. I'm a classical liberal or an extreme right-winger, depending on who's telling the story. I don't know that I would be a great representative or would offer great representation for a centrist-backed constituent majority in a district. Does that make sense how I'm saying it?
Well, I'm not sure what you said.
Okay.
It seems to me what you're saying is that the district is centrist because, in this instance, we'll use Jeff Hansen, but there's any number of other examples, because Jeff Hansen's been elected. No, Jeff Hansen's a popular politician. He's a good guy. Yep. In the same way that we have the Boehner, or whatever the Speaker of the House, however you pronounce his name, Boehner, and Mitch McConnell. These are gentlemen who are extremely unpopular with the Tea Party conservative wing of the Republican Party because they have promised to stand for certain things. They've said they've said elect us. We will stop this growth of government. We will stop this tremendous debt. And they've been unable to do it. Not clearly tougher when a Democrat is in control, but when the Republicans were in control, these guys were still there when Bush had the presidency, the House, and the Senate. No, I think that a leader will get up and say, look, Muskegon County, let's take that for example. Muskegon County, we are becoming Detroit. We have now with this almost $40 million worth of debt that they just took on to build the new jail, we have about $300 million, probably more, but about $300 million worth of debt. Let me give you an example of how that works out. Let's just say that you had a $42,000 income and you spent every penny, you pay your mortgage and everything else. And you went into a bank and you said, hey, I'd like to go I'd like to buy a new house. I have no equity in my old house. I'd like to buy a $300,000 house. And the banker might say, well, you're making $42,000 a year and you are already spending every penny of it. I don't think I'm going to make you that loan. Well, Muskegon County's, this is the county government, their discretionary income's about $42 million. They now owe, and they spend every penny of it and more, and they now owe $300 million in debt, various forms of debt. If a candidate were to run in Muskegon County, and if they were able to gain the funding and articulate the issues, at the very least, even if that candidate lost, we would get the message out. Matter of fact, I do believe that Ronald Reagan lost prior to getting nominated. That's what happens with politics. You typically lose many times before you ultimately win.
In the case of Jeff Hansen, the district already knew him. They already had a very moderate voting record. The way you worded it was kind of fascinating because you suggested that the district was moderate because they elected Hansen. And the reality of it is that they elected Hansen because they're moderate. They already had his House record. They could look at the guy and say, this guy's moderate and we're moderate. So, poof, there you go.
No, see, I disagree with that. And again, we don't know what the district is. We know who got elected. Simply, they could have voted for a hardcore, the most, well, in fact, what they did was the most liberal Republican in the Senate, clearly because they just wanted anything other than the Democrat. That doesn't mean that they wanted a liberal. That could very well have meant that they wanted the most extreme conservative out there.
Are you talking
about the only
about
choice that they had? You may recall that Jeff Hansen didn't have much in the way of any kind of primary challenges his entire political career.
Right. No question about it. No question about it.
So I don't think you can divine.
I think you're debating with me primary politics versus general election politics.
Well, the question is, what do you do if you're disappointed? If you are for instance, again, we're talking local and state. National is quite a bit different. Mm-hmm. But we're going to have a Senate, the big important Senate race coming up, with no incumbents, although probably people that have got political history behind them. But if you're faced with an incumbent, in our case, and I don't mean to be attacking Jeff on this, but he's a perfect example because it's happening right here. Someone who we believe, who has voted among many of the screens that have been put up on the internet by the Mackinac Center. Jeff Hansen has voted actually more liberal on important Tea Party and conservative issues than many Democrats. Would we be any worse off if we had a Democrat in that position than if we have a termed out last elected position, a Republican who has proven to be very much of a liberal voter? I'm not saying we should be voting Democrat. I'm not saying that those of us who are conservatives should even sit out that election. I'm asking, what can you do after you've been Charlie Brown so many times? You keep electing people based on the promises they make,
and they
break those promises.
When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about caucus politics in Lansing and D.C. Folks, we'll be right back.
Buy your used handguns and hunting guns. Renegade River, your hunting, camping, and survival store. Stop in and check out their new and used firearms, sporting goods, Army and Navy supplies, and survival gear. Downtown Spring Lake, next to the police station.
The Talk of Muskegon. News Talk 1090, WKBZ.
Cat Freds.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Renegade River Show. I'm Mike Hewitt, and Jim Riley is getting ready to tell us something about Common Core.
Well, I just wanted to make note. There are some very hardworking folks that are putting on a little presentation on what Common Core is, which is the federally funded, state-adopted election standards and curriculum. This is a big deal. This, for those of us who are unhappy with the results of our public education system, and clearly there are many of those, just by looking at the number of homeschoolers and the number of charter schools and people who have decided to take their children out of the public system. This is a very contentious issue. I think it's critically important issue. And on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, October 15th, from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m., 6:30 to 8:30 this coming Tuesday, at the Living World Church. And I think if you just Google that, you should be able to find it. But it's on 1551 Wood Street in Muskegon. It's free get-together. I do believe that the MAISD Superintendent, Sipka, will be there, and some others. And there will be a pretty decent presentation on both sides of what this Common Core will do, or at least what it's professed to do, and there will be people on a side saying the damage that they think will be done by it. And the reason this is important is that this has yet to be approved by the state of Michigan. It will be voted on by the state House and the state Senate, and ultimately, I guess, signed by the governor. So this Tuesday, October 15th, 6:30 to 8:30 at the Living Word Church on 1551 Wood Street. I'll be there, and I think it'll be a worthwhile situation. I don't know enough about Common Core to tell you if I like it or not. I do know lots of misinformation is out there, so thank you for the opportunity.
No question about it. And real briefly, and then we'll get back to me winning that debate. Dead silence. You should have seen the look on his face, folks. He thinks he's winning.
I'm confused, Mike. It's not a debate on Mike. I don't have the answers. All I know is that I'm very unhappy when I vote for people who promise to do things and they don't do it. I don't know the answer. I do think at this point the only choice that we really have is to either vote against that incumbent in a primary, or in the general, if that incumbent survives the primary, either don't vote or vote for the person of the opposite party. There may be another choice out there. I don't know. But we can't continue to vote for the same people who keep making promises and breaking those promises and expect a different outcome.
That part we absolutely agree on.
There we go.
No question. Even in the Hansen race, I've personally endorsed Nick Sundquist, who was challenging him.
Yes, there is a choice there, and there will be a primary in that race.
There will be a primary there, and but one of the things I wanted to mention before we went to the break of the last segment was caucus politics. One of the reasons that you may want to swallow once in a while and deal with somebody like Hansen in other districts, and that is that if we lose majority in the Senate, or if we lose majority in the House, absolutely nothing that's brought to the floor will be the product of conservative ideology. Absolutely nothing. You don't.
What you're saying is that if the Republicans don't continue to have the majority in the Senate,
I'm saying
that things won't even be brought up.
I'm saying if we have to put
mechanics.
And listen, you and I are, by the way, in agreement on all of these issues as far as I'm aware, except for this. If we have to put up with 4 or 5 or 6 rhinos, for lack of better words, to maintain a majority, the difference is like being sent to Siberia, because you don't chair any of the committees that decide what's going to get put to the floor. You don't get to decide what's advanced to the floor, whether it's the House or the Senate. So having a minority party is absolutely a devastation for conservative ideals or limited government, and liberty for folks that are interested in personal liberty, regardless of your party. Those are topics that they get shelved. They're not talked about until majority is won again. And so, do I necessarily like Jeff Hansen's voting record? Absolutely not. Have I endorsed the person that's challenging him? You betcha. But in the end, caucus politics is an unfortunate reality of our two-party system. We have got to maintain a majority, and I'm willing to put up with people that I don't entirely agree with to maintain that majority.
And that is the downside. And you're absolutely right. If for instance, if I were to say, well, and again, this is not personal, just a very, very nice guy. Mm-hmm. But if I were, or someone was to say, look, I'm sorry, I'm just sick and tired of it. I've had enough. I'm not going to take it any longer. I'm not just going to not vote for this person. I'm going to actually vote for the Democrat, or even sit out and not vote. The chances that the other side, the Democrat, might win are real, and there are very serious downsides to that. And I agree that it's not an easy equation.
No, it really isn't. So it's kind of it's pretty heavy lifting. Actually, we can banter it around a little bit here, more in fun than anything else. But it's some pretty heavy lifting to make those decisions on a district by district basis. And to your words earlier, we look at each candidate on an individual basis and make a decision. But the other thing I want to talk about today while we're here is a thing that I'm working on off the air. It's called Liberty Surge. That's literally the name of it, is Liberty's Surge. And I want to tell you about it, Jim, and the listeners. And Oscar, too. He may like this. Wake him up, will you?
I'm going to have to. I only have one more cap on my bottle. I'm not going to throw it at him.
Liberty Surge is a nonprofit organization. Its function will be, in fact, I'm going to contribute some money to it myself. I'm going to contribute some office space to it myself. I've already filed paperwork to get it set up as a non-profit corporation. At some point, if the IRS ever deems it to be a 503c, that'd be great. In the interim, what its purpose is to educate and to communicate a message. And it's to reach out into districts that the conservative or the liberty message is not being heard of at all. So if you go to Flint and just do a man on the street interview or a person on the street interview, talk to 100 of them, those folks are not being introduced to concepts of limited government and liberty. They're not being introduced to ideals, personal value. They're completely devoid of that. So I'm saying, at least in their pop culture, and what's being communicated to them mostly in the schools, not entirely, but mostly. So Liberty Surge is designed, or what its goal will be, is to market the concepts of a limited government and personal liberty or personal sovereignty into areas that are primarily Democrat-dominated voting blocks.
Well, here we have, you don't need to go to Flint. Right here we have the city of Muskegon, for instance, which is, I would say, probably 60, maybe 70% Democrat in voting. So how would this work in right here where we live, where we are?
If you were standing at a gas station pumping gas and you looked up and on the top, instead of a message about buying a hot dog or something, there was an advertisement that said the feeling of personal success is powerful. I'm wanting to try to inject that type of thought process back into our popular culture. And the reason I'm saying that is when I look back and say, how in the heck did we get to the point where you have a nation where the majority of people are opposed to Obamacare, but the majority of people did not want the Republican Party to do what was necessary to defund it? You sit and say, what kind of disconnect is that? We really don't want it, but it's okay, keep it going. I'm just talking about polling results, and I'm not delving into party politics when I say that. This is not designed to advance the Republican Party or Tea Parties or anybody's party. This is designed to say, how can we re-inject individual Americanism back into our American culture? And so I step back and say, how did we end up where we're at? And to me, it came from the other side, frankly, being very, very good at interjecting their message of government being the monolith of power and goodness, when clearly that's not the case. They've injected that into all elements of the pop culture, and I'm saying we need to get some of our ideals pushed into that. And so I've named it Liberty's Surge to be just what it states that way. And I'm going to try to fund it myself, at least in part. I'm going to try to get it off the ground myself and then look for some support. What do you think about that idea, Jim?
Well, I think the goal is fantastic. I don't know. I know that Republicans, conservatives in general, have a very tough time in dealing with pop culture and dealing with messaging. We know that one of the great, I think, communicators of late, Thomas Sowell, has just written a very scathing column condemning not Speaker of the House Boehner's personality, but his inability to communicate. So we have a very tough time communicating these concepts of self-empowerment and the like. I believe that the reason that the younger generation ends up with the types of mindset that they have has much to do with the type of education and the type of educators that they experience in their 13, 14, 15 years of public education. Most teachers, as we know, they're very honest about it. They tend to vote hardcore liberal Democrat, and they have contempt. In many cases, they teach it. Contempt for the capitalistic, profit-oriented system that you and I believe is a positive system, but they don't like it. And I think if I was teaching a class, chances are my positive views of capitalism would likely cross over into the class, and it isn't shocking to me that the hardcore liberal socialist views of the teachers, who admittedly are hardcore liberal socialists in many cases, is drifting over to these young people during this. Remember, we're not talking about a gas station stop. We're talking about 13, 14, 15, 16 years of federally funded, state-funded, locally funded government indoctrination in many cases. So I'm all for it. I'd like to see more of us get involved in it. I think it's a great idea. At least it's a heck of a start. It sure beats anything I've heard coming out of the Republican Party.
To me, it's trying to convey a general concept. The finger in the the finger in the dike type of thing. But when I look back at it and say, how can we've got to communicate a message. And so you and I, most of the Republican Party, certainly all the talking heads on TV, are all debating what's going on with the Republican Party or the war in the Republican Party and all that. And meanwhile, it's like we've, on our side of the fence, have just simply written off the other side as being the enemy camp, period. And I reject that kind of thinking entirely, and think that we need to reach out to them with not politically driven highbrow messages, but frankly a little bit like my sister Brenda Brown would have said when she'd say, why don't you folks communicate so regular people will pay attention to you? And it's kind of hard to argue with that logic when we've got Speaker Boehner talking about, and rightfully so by the way, but talking about 17 trillion this or 70 trillion that. The average person has no clue how to get their head around that or what it means to them personally. And to my greater point with Liberty Surge, the folks that we're talking about in these markets, Muskegon to a degree, Flint to a degree, all across the state of Michigan first, and then working out across America, these people have never been introduced to the concepts of choose liberty and freedom. They haven't. They've been introduced to the idea of, they've not been raised in large part. There's the refrigerator, there's your Game Boy, there's the TV, leave me alone, has been kind of a montage to some of those folks.
Well, we saw yesterday, my gosh, Xerox does incredibly on a Saturday, arguably the biggest shopping day of any week. The corporation Xerox, hired by the federal government, or I believe it was the federal government, certainly with state government money, decides to have a test of their system for the bridge cards. I think, was it 9 or 14 states? The entire bridge card system shut down yesterday. Commerce ended in many, many cities because of the total dependence upon free money from who knows where, who cares where, to folks with the bridge cards and whatever they call the similar card in other states. I don't know. You didn't hear this? This is huge.
I heard it because I didn't know.
Massive.
I didn't have a clue what EFT meant when I walked up to the store. The EFT system's on. I'm going, what, my debit card won't work? What's the problem?
Exactly. No, everybody's debit card would work and their credit card would work. It was just the state cards. And again, the wonderful private-public partnership between the morons at Xerox and the equally moronic government people who hired Xerox to do it, it didn't work. Now, the problem is with you trying to sell what I believe is an extraordinarily good and noble concept, which is liberty and self-empowerment. How can you break through the fact that you've got your idea of good, fuzzy, warm feelings, and they've got cash money?
They do, but I'm hoping Liberty Surge can raise cash money.
No, I'm talking about they're giving it out.
Well,
they're giving it out in the form of a credit card.
Yeah, and that's really hard to override. There's no question about it. But I got to tell you, having been broke and having made fairly good money in my life, I can tell you that the feeling of success has got to be a better feeling. I mean, what's that old saying that all everyone needs is a victory once in a while?
You bet.
I really believe that a lot.
No, I don't get me wrong. I love your concept.
I spent 3 decades training salespeople, and I a lot of times, by the way, I'd get people that were salespeople only because they couldn't find anything else to do in life. That's why they were there doing a job they didn't want to do. And I knew in my heart that if I could introduce them to victory, I would really turn a person on to be something that they probably didn't previously believe. So I'm sitting down looking at Flint, and I'm looking at Muskegon, and I'm looking at, and by the way, not just cities, because this is all across Michigan. We can say it's denser in this one area than it is in that area in terms of population, but it's a message that I think lacks in general. The concepts of choose freedom, well, like I said earlier, the feeling of personal success is powerful. I want to introduce those folks to that, and the only way to do it is to engage in pop culture. So doing doing 30-second and 15-second commercial spots on radio frequencies that are going to get into the young generation market, putting the message literally on the Johnny advertising over a urinal in a bathroom. Things like, are you a father and a dad? I want messaging to be powerful, but to be short and really, really concise. Does that make sense?
I think it does, and I think it's a great idea, certainly a great concept. I just wonder, you've seen David Letterman and Jay Leno and others, the man on the street. I wonder how many people in the city of Muskegon, how many people in the city of Flint, if you asked what liberty meant, could even define it.
That's exactly, it's funny that you say that, Jim, because exactly what I want to do is help folks come to a definition of the word liberty. We're going to go to a break, folks. We'll pick right back up in a minute. Welcome back. You're listening to the Renegade River Show, and I'm Mike Hewitt in with Jim Riley.
Having a lovely discussion about bottom wipes.
It's a scary thought. I don't know how we're going to segue from that back to Liberty Surge, but I got to try.
Oh, yeah, speaking of Surge.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, here's what I'm planning on starting with this thing. Part of this in the next few minutes is a little bit of reminders and a couple notes. For Liberty Surge, the way I'm going to get this thing started at least, it's going to begin next week. If you folks recall, next Saturday, October 19th, from 8 in the morning until 4 p.m. is the Great Lakes Emergency Preparedness Expo. And
oh, that's right. Yes.
It's next Saturday, and it's free. It's in Birch Run, Michigan. There's going to be a whole bunch of people there with different products on display. And there'll be a handful of people that will be speakers. I'm one of the speakers there talking about a couple things. First, what I'm talking about is what's going on in America from my vantage point as a gun shop owner. And then the second half of my hour will be focused on actually my book, America's Final Beginning. And what I'm going to do with that book, this actually does tie into Liberty Surge, by the way, but what I'm going to do with that book is I'm going to do a one-day relaunch of that book, which I'll be announcing at the expo next week. And right now, for folks listening, on October 22, which is the Tuesday immediately following the expo, I'm going to do a one-day relaunch, and all of the money that I raised from selling that book at Amazon.com from that day, I'm going to work hard, by the way, folks, at promoting that one-day thing that's not for me personally. I'm going to take that money and use that money to combine with the monies that I'm already putting in myself that will provide Liberty Surge, a nonprofit organization with office space and the general basics to put its foundation in place so that it can begin to move forward to try to convey some of these messages of American individual ruggedness and liberty.
And the bulk of the expenditures are going to be essentially on advertising and signs and things of that sort.
It's all messaging.
Okay.
So I'm looking at doing leaflets, and I mean, some of them are very simplistic. Leaflets as much as stapled to a telephone pole on a street somewhere. Pop music spots on radio stations. Maybe some limited cable TV spots.
And what about your Facebook and Twitter and things of that sort?
Social media, absolutely.
Okay.
Because it's
YouTube videos?
YouTube videos, but keeping in mind, folks, that in YouTube, Jim, is along with trying to raise money for this project, we're going to need boots on the ground. We're going to have people to help us get these messages put out. People that if you can speak publicly, to maybe meet with social getting groups together in those communities that will raise as a result of some of the media work we're going to do. But that's how I'm going to fund it. I'm going to fund it with obviously contributions, providing the foundation for it myself, and then its initial funding coming with the sale of America's Final Beginning, targeted for October 22. And I'm specifically asking everyone that wants to do that. And by the way, on the book, when I'm talking about using the book as a fundraiser, Amazon.com specifically, because the funding gets through the system and it actually gets accounted for more accurately, frankly, so that when the check comes that will go towards Liberty Surge, it's you can bank on it. So if you get someone buying from all of these, because the book is everywhere, But if we go right to Amazon, it's easier to account for it and say this is where it came from and this is where it's going to. But the book, I don't have the pricing off the top of my head, but you can get it for as little as $3.90 in digital form. But all of the money that it raises for sale will go to Liberty Surge. What do you think of that?
Well, I think, the reality of life is that any concept that anyone has to push a political or social concept requires money to get the word out. We all know that everybody is fighting for the moments, in time in a Facebook post or a Twitter, or certainly we see the advertising on the Super Bowl, how expensive that can be. You cannot get your concept, your ideals out to the public for free in general, so you got to raise some money for it.
It's truly stunning how much marketing or advertising in general is, and this is all of that. Now we may be able to get some community news spots at gratis, but a lot of it, for instance, a billboard, that stuff gets pretty pricey. So we're going to need some help, and I'm going to start by myself helping, and then myself volunteering at it. I just think it's important, if we're really going to get in this, to stop fighting amongst ourselves and start reaching across and getting these really fundamental basic concepts marketed, advanced, communicated, that's the word I'm looking for, to other folks.
Well, I would like, and you're going to have obviously a greater chance of success if you can see other conservatives, people of like mind, who would join into this, and not only just in financing and volunteering, but also at higher levels than you and I are, at the county levels, at the state levels, at the national levels, to start pushing these kinds of concepts. It is sad to me that we just don't seem to have anything on the political world where our politicians seem to stand for the concepts that have made America great. You do see organizations like the Mackinac Center and the Heritage Foundation and private organizations that'll stand tall for this. And I would think getting some help from them, or at least advice from them, would probably be an interesting opportunity for you to take a look at too.
Absolutely. I got to tell you, they do a great job at educating, frankly, like-minded people. And with that, I think you're absolutely right. They may be more than willing to step up to the pump and help us communicate to folks that have simply never heard this kind of thinking before.
Well, you're right. A lot of people have never been exposed to it, and that is a sad, sad situation.
The other thing I wanted to get to today, just to recap what we've been talking about. First off, the Great Lakes Emergency Preparedness Expo next Saturday in Birch Run. You can find it at greatlakespreppers.com.
And that is what day next week?
That's next Saturday, October 19th, from 8 a.m. till 4 p.m. It's in Birch Run, Michigan, which is between Flint and Saginaw, right on I-75. It's free. So other than it's a couple-hour drive, it's a free. There's going to be a whole bunch to hear, see, and learn. Keeping in mind, folks, if you don't consider you're a prepper, this is also not just that. In fact, more so, it's about being emergency preparedness for storms and for all kind of other things.
Well, you bet, for winter storms, and we know that there are going to be significant and terribly disruptive power outages coming down the pike. We have seen here in Muskegon County, not that long ago, we saw the sewer system have a terrible break, and people couldn't use the sewer. We've got a situation now where we've got both Norton Shores and Muskegon and Fruitport Township who are moving their water service from currently Muskegon Heights into the city of Muskegon. So we're going to have the city of Muskegon who will be operating the water for virtually every single entity within the county. That's one solid location that certainly the socialists will love the idea that it's that much more efficient. But on the other hand, if something were to happen, then all of a sudden we've got some disasters. So thinking ahead and preparing for energy, for food, for protection of your home in the event that horrible things happen and you're the only one in the neighborhood that's got electricity and food, you might want to have a gun, or at least some way to protect those things that you work so hard to make available during a tough time.
I certainly feel that way, and I know of a place that a person, if they wanted to have personal protection, I know where they could go to buy it, and that's Renegade River.
Right in Spring Lake, right next door to the police station, too, which is right on the main drag. You can park right out front. You can stop in and pay a parking ticket and go buy yourself a Gatling gun if you want.
I think we got Oscar to blush a little bit with that unabashed self-promotion.
Hey, it's your show, baby.
Hey, and then on another note, speaking of Renegade River, a fairly large part of the square footage is in the middle of segueing itself into what we're referring to as Renegade River's Consignment Emporium. And what it essentially is, right now, as you look at it, we're a outdoor store that probably focuses on firearms.
But you have lots of tents and things of that sort.
We've got tents, we've got backpacking, food, and about everything else you can imagine on that line. But the other half of the store, we're kind of segueing into what, like I say, we're going to call it the Consignment Emporium, and it's literally got right now it's just started, but it's got a pinball machine from 1961, a couple really cool vintage payphones, dial-up payphones that actually function in your house, but it's something you would have saw at some local, street pole or somewhere else 30 or 40 or 50 years ago. I love that stuff. But there's a weight machine in there. There's a harbor, a very eclectic collection, but it's mostly outdoor driven or frankly guy stuff. If you went to the perfect guy garage sale, that's kind of what that portion of Renegade River is starting to shape up like. I'm having a lot of fun with it, but it's just neat stuff. And the folks right next door to Renegade River have I think it's called the Lakeshore. What it is, it's all women's consignment. So hats and dresses and clothes. And of course, it might turn into something where a husband and a wife, just folks could come visit her store, visit Renegade River, and there's literally a little bit for something for everybody there.
So the guy doesn't have to sit in the car.
Well, mostly they don't anyways. A lot of times what happens there is the wife or the girlfriend will go in to see the boutique. That's what it is. The name is Boutique. To her shop, the Boutique, while the guy comes into Renegade River and looks at the firearms and stuff. But it's nice that Renegade River will end up with a whole bunch more of that. So if you're looking to trade something, consign something, or buy something, Renegade River is a place where you want to do it at.
Well, let me just add one other thing in terms of firearms. Honey Bunch, because I love Honey Bunch so much, nothing says I love you with more passion than giving a loved one a firearm for their birthday. And she's got a lovely Ruger 380 that we purchased at your store. Women owning firearms makes tremendous amount of sense, and we were wonderfully treated there. And I know Honey Bunch probably prefers that to gift to any of the other frilly things I've given her, like snow tires and electric drills. So she just loves that.
The fascinating thing about it is I think people are surprised at, but probably 35-40% of the folks that buy firearms from Renegade River are female. Interestingly, though, statistically, women shoot better in competition than men do. They hold the gun steadier, they're just more accurate. I hate to say it, but it's the absolute truth.
Well, I'm all for it. The women tend to be smaller and a little less powerful than bad guys, and when they got a gun, that's the great equalizer. That's
exactly what Smith & Wesson said. No question about it. So, any final things that you want to...
Well, I would just like to, again, remind, if I could, Tuesday, October 15th, this is coming Tuesday, 8:30, or 6:30 to 8:30, 1551 Wood Street, the Living Word Church. We're going to be talking about Common Core. I don't know enough to tell you whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, but I do know that they're going to have people proponents of it, and they're going to have people who are very critical of it. And this is going to be a very, very important issue going forward, and it certainly connects with what you're talking about, is educating our children.
No question about it. To me, Common Core, when they say they're creating global citizens, that sends up massive alarm bells for a fellow like me.
We want them to be American citizens. At least that would be my choice.
Yeah, and not only that, but I surely don't want them to water down the education of my grandkids so that they can match up with somebody in who knows where. Folks, we'll be back next Sunday. Have a great week, and I'll see you at the Renegade River. I'll see you at the Great Lakes Expo.